This is Zero Daze. I'm Chloe Kingman.
And I'm Owen Albright.
September 1st, 2015. The Pantex plant outside Amarillo, Texas. The facility where the United States assembles and disassembles its nuclear stockpile. An unidentified object is over the site. The plant goes into a temporary lockdown. 2 security officers respond, and somebody writes it up. That single incident report is, in its entirety, what the Department of Energy has contributed to the largest UAP disclosure in American history.
One report, and it arrived 2 months after the portal opened, the Central Intelligence Agency turned up at roughly the same time with a stack of historical sighting assessments. Both agencies are now technically in the file set, and the shape of what they released matters far more than the count. Begin with the documented layer, because it is real and it is enormous.
Set the tiers before we go anywhere, because this subject punishes anyone who blurs them. There is what is documented, there is what is claimed but uncorroborated, and there is what is structurally corroborated, which means the architecture around a claim holds up, even when no released paper sits underneath the claim itself. We will name the tier out loud every time.
The Pursue initiative launched on May 8, 2026, coordinated across the White House, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Energy, Aero, NASA, the Bureau, and additional intelligence agencies. The first tranche held 162 files. The second, released May 22, added 64 more. And the material is genuinely significant.
222 files across those 2 tranches, sphere footage, infrared tracking video, a Lake Huron shootdown, submarine transmedium encounters, an intelligence officer's first-person account of orbs chasing fighter jets, 82 years of records, and the most comprehensive single-source UAP disclosure anyone has ever assembled.
MQ-9 Reaper footage of spheres over the Middle East, infrared video from United States Central Command showing instant acceleration near the Jordan-Syria border, a Coast Guard infrared capture of an object near a commercial aircraft, Apollo-era astronaut transcripts, State Department cables from embassies across 5 countries.
And Bureau interview forms, the 302 forms, documenting a senior intelligence officer's encounter with what the file calls a super hot orb, hovering over the ground in the western United States. None of that is small.
But look at what kind of records they are. Almost without exception, observational. A sensor recorded something, a witness described something. Nobody explained what it was. The releases document the phenomenon. They do not document the institutional response to the phenomenon, which is the seam running through the whole release.
As the former Navy aviator Ryan Graves put it, the public is left trying to interpret fragments without the information needed to separate mundane explanations from genuinely unresolved cases.
Observational data answers one question: what did we see? It does not answer the 2 questions the disclosure fight has been about for decades. What do we have, and what have we learned from it? And those 2 point at specific institutional addresses, neither of which is the Pentagon. The Energy Department operates under a classification authority that predates and supersedes the executive order system every other federal agency runs on.
One is the Department of Energy's National Laboratories. The other is the Central Intelligence Agency's Directorate of Science and Technology. Take the Energy Department first, because that is where the documented tier turns structural.
The Atomic Energy Act of 1954 established a category called restricted data, covering all information concerning the design, manufacture, or utilization of atomic weapons, the production of special nuclear material, or its use in energy production. That is not how the rest of the federal system works, and the difference is the whole story.
And restricted data has one feature that changes the entire picture. In the language of the law, it is born classified. Information meeting the statutory definition is automatically secret from the moment it is created, regardless of who creates it, with no formal classification action required. Nobody stamps it. Nobody decides. It simply is.
Ordinary classified information is created by executive order. A president can declassify it. Congress can compel its release. The Freedom of Information Act reaches it, however imperfectly. Restricted data is created by statute, and a presidential executive order cannot override a congressional statute. And this is not a theory we are importing from outside the record.
So the Act gives the Energy Department sole authority to determine what qualifies, and sole authority to declassify it. No other agency, the White House included, can unilaterally force its release. The President can order the Pentagon to open its filing cabinets, and the Pentagon opens them. He cannot order the Energy Department to release restricted data.
The UAP Disclosure Act, in both its 2023 Schumer-Rounds version and the 2025 Burleson reintroduction, identifies the problem explicitly.
The legislative findings state that credible evidence shows UAP records exist that have not been declassified due to Atomic Energy Act exemptions and overbroad interpretations of transclassified foreign nuclear information.
That is Congress on the record in statutory findings saying the Energy Department has been using the Atomic Energy Act as a blanket classification shield for UAP-related material. Mark the tier carefully. The finding is documented. What sits behind the shield is not.
And the mechanism is almost mechanical. Walk it.
If a recovered object emits radiation, or if analysis of its materials involves nuclear processes or exotic energy signatures, the resulting data falls under the statutory definition of restricted data. It does not matter that the object is not a nuclear weapon. The definition covers utilization of atomic energy and special nuclear material, and those terms are interpreted by the Energy Department's own Office of Classification.
So the agency that would be holding the material also writes the definition of what must be held. Once material enters that category, it is walled off from the executive branch declassification system entirely.
Only Congress can change the statute, or the Energy Department can move the material into the formerly restricted data category, which has its own, still restrictive path.
Now put the national laboratories into it, because that is where the structural tier lives.
If retrieval and analysis programs are housed at or funneled through the Energy Department's laboratories, Los Alamos, Sandia, Oak Ridge, Lawrence Livermore, Battelle, then the resulting data enters a classification system that Arrow cannot access, that the President cannot unilaterally declassify, and that Pursue cannot compel the release of.
A statutory fortress built in 1954 to protect nuclear weapons secrets, repurposed, according to the congressional findings themselves, to protect something else.
And say the tier plainly, that the firewall exists, that it works this way, that Congress has flagged it, all documented. Whether retrieval material is actually sitting behind it is the claimed layer. The wall is real. What is on the far side of it is asserted, not shown.
Second address, the Central Intelligence Agency, and its silence is a different kind of silence. The Energy Department has a statutory excuse. The agency has an institutional one, and the documentary record under it is more concrete than most coverage acknowledges.
The agency's Directorate of Science and Technology, DS&T, has been identified by David Grusch as a central administrative node in the legacy program structure. That identification is the claimed tier. What comes next is not.
The Kona Blue incident.
Documented in Arrow's own historical review, in 2011, a Lockheed Martin vice president proposed transferring UAP-related hardware to the Defense Intelligence Agency's ATIP program, and the agency's Directorate of Science and Technology blocked it.
Sit with what that means. The agency did not decline to participate. It exercised veto authority over another agency's access to material that a contractor was holding.
And that veto authority is not an inference drawn from silence. A 1982 agency memorandum, sitting in its own public reading room, shows the Directorate of Science and Technology explicitly discussing the use of contractor independent research and development spending at defense firms, including TRW, to support its own operational needs.
So the agency was not passively aware of how contractors allocated research money.
It was directing the allocation.
That trail, surfaced by the investigative researcher UAP Gerb in his Northrop Grumman and TRW analysis, establishes the Directorate as a coordination layer between classified programs and the contractor infrastructure executing them.
And the personnel thread reinforces the structural one. Walk it.
Stephanie O'Sullivan spent 1982 to 1985 at TRW on what her later Battelle Memorial Institute board biography describes only as a series of sensitive projects. She moved to the Office of Naval Intelligence, then spent a decade at the agency, rising to Deputy Director of the Directorate of Science and Technology.
And then higher still.
From 2011 to 2017, she served as Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence under James Clapper, whom Grusch named publicly as having managed the crash retrieval issue and placed people in critical roles to handle it. She is now Chairman of the Aerospace Corporation, itself a TRW spin-off, and notably the only entity besides the agency to respond to congressional interrogatories on legacy programs.
And that briefing in Gerb's assessment was deliberately uninformative.
Keep the tiers straight through all of that, because it is a lot of names moving quickly. The memorandum is documented. The employment histories are documented. What they add up to, a coordination architecture for retrieval material, is the structurally corroborated tier. The paper trail holds a shape. It does not hand you a confession.
And the claim at the center of that shape belongs to one man, under oath. Say it precisely.
When Grusch testified in July of 2023, he said he had been informed in the course of his official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. He provided classified specifics to the intelligence community Inspector General, who found his complaint credible and urgent.
And that is the claimed layer, stated as precisely as it can be stated. A named witness, on the record, under oath, whose complaint an Inspector General called credible and urgent. Credible and urgent is a finding about the complaint. It is not a confirmation of the program. Those are different things, and the discipline is to hold them apart.
Which brings us to what changed, because both agencies did finally show up. 2 months after the portal opened, without a single record from either one, the third and fourth tranches, released June 12th and July 10th of 2026, carry the first Energy Department and agency files the program has produced.
The third tranche, June 12th, added 72 files and leaned heavily on the agency and the Bureau. Its agency material runs historical, roughly 8 records reaching back to the agency's involvement in 1953 Robertson panel, the body convened to assess whether sighting reports posed a national security problem.
Alongside those sit the Bureau's Colorado Springs file from 2022, a northeastern orb sighting series with reports continuing into 2026, NASA Gemini program debriefings, and a first-person record of the October 2023 multi-agent event at a sensitive Western site that Arrow has called among the most compelling in its holdings.
The fourth tranche, July 10th, added 40 files and named the Energy Department for the first time. And the Energy Department contribution is the Pantex hookport we opened with. 1 incident, 1 temporary lockdown, 2 security officers.
The same tranche carried a 1949 conference at Los Alamos, where physicists who had worked on the Manhattan Project, Edward Teller among them, failed to agree on what the green fireballs appearing over New Mexico's nuclear sites actually were.
A set of 1955 sighting assessments, a 1973 intelligence report on Soviet missile systems that notes an unidentified aerial object in passing, Project Sign from 1948, a review of Project Blue Book, NASA Apollo and Skylab transcripts, and State Department cables rounded out.
Now, sort every one of those documents because they only come in 3 kinds: an observation, an analysis of an observation, or an administrative record of a security event. The Robertson panel was a review board. Project Sign was an evaluation of sighting reports. The Los Alamos conference was a disagreement among scientists. The Pantex file is a Guard Force incident report.
None of it is a retrieval record. None of it is a materials analysis. None of it is a reverse engineering document. And that distinction is the entire point, because the claim places exactly those 3 things with exactly these 2 agencies.
The new files neither confirm it nor touch it. They occupy the territory adjacent to it.
And look at where the Energy Department records cluster, because the pattern is hard to miss. Nuclear facilities. Pantex assembles and disassembles the American stockpile. Los Alamos designed the first weapons. The green fireballs of the late 1940s were tracked precisely because they appeared over nuclear installations.
That clustering is not incidental, and it is not disclosure of the core question. It traces the edge of the firewall, and it traces the releasable edge specifically. A security report describing an object seen over Pantex is not restricted data, so it can be reviewed and released.
A document describing the composition, structure, or engineering of recovered material would be restricted data or the related category of trans-classified foreign nuclear information, and it would stay classified by operation of the statute regardless of any executive order disclosure.
Everything released so far sits on the releasable side of that line. Nothing on the other side has moved.
So, the appearance of both agencies reads as participation. The structural tell is what is still absent. No released file overrides the Atomic Energy Act for this category of material. No document is a retrieval or reverse engineering record. And the legislation that would change that has not passed. The UAP Disclosure Act, which would create an independent review board with declassification authority and eminent domain power over recovered material, is still a floor amendment to the Defense Authorization Bill.
There is a record-keeping tell sitting on top of the classification one, and it is quieter, but just as sharp.
Congress created a statutory National Archives collection to preserve this material, Record Group 615, with an independent review mandate. As of publication, it lists transfers from 7 agencies, and the Energy Department and the agency are not among them. Their files went into the executive branch's curated portal, not the independent collection that carries the review authority.
Which is what an orderly exit looks like from the inside. Release the layer that carries no legal or personal consequence, while the layer that would carry both stays exactly where it was. A 1949 conference memo and a 2015 Guard report cost nothing to make public.
The records Grusch described would cost a great deal, and none of them are here.
So the 2 tranches answer a narrow question, and they answer it honestly. Did these agencies hold any releasable UAP records at all? They did, and we have now seen them. They leave the larger question exactly where the May analysis left it.
And that is where we have to be careful, because there are 2 live possibilities here, and neither one has been settled.
The first is the one the claim describes. Retrieval and reverse engineering material exists. It sits behind a statutory wall built in 1954 for an entirely different purpose, and what we are watching is a managed release of everything that costs nothing to release.
The second is that the wall is real, the architecture is real, the career histories are real, and there is nothing of that kind behind any of it. That the holdings are genuinely bounded, and the releases look bounded because they are.
Both possibilities are consistent with every document released so far. That is an uncomfortable thing to say, and it is the accurate thing to say, and we are not going to pick between them, because the evidence in hand does not let anyone pick between them honestly.
What would settle it is not another tranche of historical sightings. It is a statute that overrides the Atomic Energy Act for this category of material, and a body with the authority to reach compartmented programs above Arrow's access level.
And that is the part worth sitting with. The scrutiny that would resolve this in either direction, toward the claim or away from it, has not happened.
Neither exists yet. The Pentagon can show you what its pilots recorded. The 2 agencies that would hold whatever was found, analyzed, and reverse engineered are governed by a different law and a different lock. The volume of the release was never the measure of transparency. The measure is whether the agencies holding the substantive material are compelled to participate. So far, they are not, and they know it.
Full sourcing and citations are in the article at strangerthanfiction.org. The link is in the description.